Joining us to discuss the trial of Luigi Mangione, accused of murdering a United Health Group executive in New York last year, is trial attorney Jeremy Rosenthal. Good to have you with us today. Jeremy, murder is typically considered a state crime, so how likely is a death penalty here, and what factors are at play?
I think it's unlikely that the government is successful in executing him. Legally, it's possible. What you have to prove is that you had a premeditated, an intentional homicide, and there has to be what's called an aggravating factor. And then there's some other issues with whether or not that aggravating factor outweighs mitigation. It can be a little complex, but this is not generally the fact pattern that you see with a death case. The government's alleging that the aggravated factor here is somewhat terror related in that he struck somebody who is kind of a public figure, and that it was calculated to kind of make a more widespread political statement. But this is not typically the fact pattern you would see. When you do see death penalty cases, it tends to be typically multiple homicides or some other type of murder in the furtherance of a different type of felony, a bank robbery, kidnapping, things like that.
So to get that terrorism charge in play, they would need to prove that people felt terrorized, or how would they really follow through on that?
They would have to show that that's his intent. But the way that a death sentence works is that in the federal courts, judges generally handle sentencing. In this instance, a jury would have to be the ones that could or would have to assess a death penalty. And they have to do so unanimously by a 12-0 vote. In a death penalty case, one single juror can save this man's life, which is why it's so hard to get over that hump, especially in a case where there are so many mental health overtones. You had a man with Luigi Mangione who his parents and his friends and his family said, we didn't recognize this man over the last 6 months. Prior to that, he was this way. And after that, he sort of broke touch with us. And there's a lot of things which suggest some type of, if it wasn't a complete break with reality, it certainly shows some type of mental health issues. Always hard, I think, to try to execute somebody who's going through that type of individual turmoil. And I think most jurors, once they're exposed to that for a month or more, which is how long this trial would take, I think it's very hard for them not to see his life worth sparing.
Yeah, and in terms of the high-profile nature of this case, the jury will be selected for this sentencing. So what would be considered there?
You would ask these jurors their opinions about the death penalty. The government could eliminate jurors who simply would never assess the death penalty. You are entitled, each party is entitled to a jury that will follow the law. So somebody who says, I would never administer the death penalty in any circumstance, the government's entitled to have them struck. So in other words, each party is entitled to jurors that could do one thing or the other. Something else I think that's worth noting, which is, and I don't know that this happens here, in fact, it probably doesn't, but the Department of Justice, when they seek the death penalty in a case like this, they kind of flirt with some problems that they may not want. In a case like this, the defense could waive a jury and ask the judge to assess the punishment. If a jury thinks that a judge is going to have a defendant executed, you're more likely to have a complete acquittal of the case. So by seeking the death penalty and functionally potentially overcharging him, you could flirt with completely losing the case, which the Department of Justice absolutely doesn't want to do here.
Fascinating. And also, the defense has argued that Attorney General Pam Bondi, suggesting even earlier on that she would seek the death penalty for him, it could actually prejudice the jury. So how much does that argument play into any kind of sentencing or even the selection of the jury?
Well, it does. It does. And if the government convicts Mangione but does not get the death sentence, it's an automatic life sentence. So if a jury is given a choice to convict or acquit, and then they convict, but then they don't assess the death, it's automatic life. So there is an advantage there. And look, the Attorney General is entitled to follow the full remedies that the law provides the government, which in this instance could be the death penalty. So Attorney General Bondi is not doing anything wrong. She was confirmed by the U.S. Senate and appointed by the President of the United States. If she, on behalf of the United States of America, thinks that death is appropriate, then she is making it clear that she's seeking that. Can it color the jury pool or taint the jury pool? I don't know. But at a minimum, that will be the debate, is life or death, which, if you're a prosecutor, is a healthier debate than guilty or not guilty.
Okay, and he is, of course, facing state and federal charges. Do the state charges impact, do the cases impact each other in any way?
You would anticipate in most instances like this that the state charges are typically going to take the lead, and that the federal government is going to kind of take a back roll. That has appeared to be the case with Mangione, that the state of New York is going to kind of get their bite first in this case. Now, by the government seeking the death penalty and New York State not seeking the death penalty, it's pretty clear that he's going to face probably multiple trials here. In a lot of situations like this, what you could see when you have both a state and a federal prosecution that are side by side, you could see in most instances one conviction. And then once that goes away, you might see a plea bargain on the back end on the other one, just as you don't want to waste taxpayer resources like that. But in this instance, it's pretty clear that he's going to have two trials. And the second trial, if that's the federal trial, is obviously going to be more high stakes.
And we'll be watching closely, hopefully speak to you soon about that. Jeremy Rosenthal, trial attorney and founding partner of Rosenthal, Calabas, and Therian. Good to speak with you.
Thanks. Take care.